From beautiful East Tennessee in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, you're listening to the Sherry Voluntary Show, and I do appreciate you spending your time with me. Today, on this episode of the Sherry Voluntary Show, we're going to play an appearance I had on the Writer's Block with Matt Wright. And we have a really interesting conversation, and we talk a lot about science fiction and its sort of influence on my life and his as well. So I hope you enjoy.
Now, my guest today is somebody who truly should need absolutely no introduction whatsoever. She is the former host of Speaking Freely and the host of Postcards from Somalia, as well as the host of the Sherry Voluntary Show. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Sherry Voluntary. What is going on, Sherry? How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, I am super excited to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to meet because a couple of weeks ago I had Adrienne Cardin.
Mm-hmm.
I had Adrienne Cardin on the show, and she was singing all of the high praises to you, and she was just a huge fan, which is awesome. And she was like, "Oh yeah, you should totally have her on your show sometime." And I was like, "Great, I will definitely have her on my show sometime." And
Cool.
a couple of weeks later, you're here.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to be here. I'm interested to talk about what we're talking about tonight.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Whatever that is.
Whatever it is, whatever we happen to come across, because I do very little preparation for this show. So I know that you are an anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that you got to be, before we get into the other things that we kind of like briefly touched on, how is it that you became an anarchist?
Well, I guess the shorter version of it is that I became a libertarian from listening to I thought I was a libertarian, let's say that, from
Right.
listening to a radio show out of Atlanta called the Neil Bortz radio show. And he was on for many years down there. And he was a libertarian, more like a big L libertarian. He used to do a bunch of, I don't know if it was called Freedom Fest or it was something they did together with Sean Hannity.
Okay.
So that tells you what kind of
Right. Yeah, I was
libertarian
going
he
to say, got it. Know that libertarian.
Yeah, he was a former lawyer, and he actually wrote do you remember the Fair Tax book?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that. So that's the guy from that radio show.
Okay.
And what really got me interested was
that's not Eric Erickson, is it?
No,
No.
Neil Bortz.
Neil Bortz. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. He would talk about eminent domain a lot,
Right.
and I'd never heard of eminent domain. I was surprised that I'd never heard of it, and it really shocked me that our government could do that. And I was a Republican. I mean, I was really neo-Connie, right? I should make a sock account called Neo-Connie. But so I was a big neocon, but I mean, I always had this love for freedom and the principles of freedom as I saw them at the time. And I really thought the Republican Party was leaving me because I was a Republican. And with George W. Bush and things like that, even though I liked him, the last time I voted was voting for him. And, you know, I realized that he wasn't a conservative. Like, I'm like, that guy's not a conservative.
Right.
But it was close enough. Like, I liked him. So, you know, and we had to suspend free market principles, save the free market, all those things. Right?
I was just about to make that quote of
the mission was accomplished and all that.
Yeah. In order to save the free market, we had to suspend free market principles. Like,
yeah,
what?
that's one of my favorite.
That makes no sense, George.
Yeah, exactly. So there was all that. And so I was already sort of leaving Republicanism, but I didn't really know what I was. So I started listening to Neil Bortz. I thought, oh, I'm a libertarian. I get this. I'm, you know, pretty much socially liberal. I think people should be able to be left alone. And I'm definitely financial or fiscally conservative. So, you know, I thought libertarianism was the centrist sort of position between the two, the best of both worlds. And years later, I realized I was wrong. Started reading more Ayn Rand, and then Jason Lewis is a radio show guy out of Minneapolis,
Okay.
and Tom Woods used to fill in for him,
Oh, okay.
and that is yeah.
Right.
So that was really where my transformation to a real libertarian and a real anarchist really sped up was listening to Tom Woods. So that's how I became an anarchist
Gotcha.
in the short version.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I too was a neocon, and which not happy about it. When the Iraq War started, I was like, hoorah! And that now I'm like, oh god, that was me at one point in my life. But much like the late Walter Jones, I have admitted I was wrong in that. But yeah, I was a neocon, and then I kind of found the Libertarian Party, and I was like, this sounds a lot more like me. And I know that when we were talking the other day, I told you that I'm not like, I'm leaning, I'm getting like Spike, who is my co-host on Muddied Waters of Freedom. He is just pulling me with all of his might toward anarchy, anarchy. And I'm just like, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I see your point there, but, and he's always got an answer that I can accept. And I'm like, all right, but what about, okay, got it. So like, I'm like, I still consider myself like a minarchist. I still consider myself like a minarchist, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but yeah, this makes no sense either. So like, he's getting me there step by step by step, and not in an obnoxious way.
I think it's interesting when you're probably already there. It's just giving up the idea of the safety of government, because we've been taught all our lives that the government takes care of us, right? And the government provides safety nets for poor people and keeps, the Mongolian horde at bay and all those things, which honestly just isn't true. And the more you see it, the more you go, wow, I can let go of this. But I think also a lot of people get scared because they don't realize that with anarchy, especially libertarian anarchism, it's not lawlessness, right? There's common law, there's contract law. So that's one issue. And then it doesn't mean there will be no governance.
Right.
So just because there's not a state, which our government is rolled up into that, in that violent and coercive state, that governance of, say, a city, which would be encompassed in the subsidiarity, which would be small competing governances, then I think a lot of people can accept that a little easier, because really that's all it is about bottom up governance, starting with the individual, and then individuals can organize together into municipalities that would cover sewage issues and roads and things like that. So we'd probably have zones where there is no government, and you'd have certainly places where there is governance. So
and so what I was actually about to say is that the way that I kind of see it is, if a group of people, like, okay, so the city that I live in, which isn't St. Pete, but we'll call it St. Pete. So if the people of St. Pete were like, hey, we should have some sort of board that handles all of this stuff. And then like, essentially they're just setting up their own government, but they would be voluntarily doing it. It's not like they're being forced into it. And that's kind of where I see my minarchism, which some people may say is anarchism. But like, if other areas like Ocala, Florida, decided that they did not want any government whatsoever, any board looking over them, then they wouldn't have one. And I would be okay with either.
Yeah, and it's a matter of really the acceptance in society that it's not okay to force people to do things just because you want them. So if you want to organize with your neighborhood to, say, put in a new sewage system, but there are people who don't want to, well, you can't force them. So that would be the difference in a governance, a libertarian governance, than a government, a state that would, I mean, states are usually generally much bigger and centralized, but these would be non-centralized. And even if you did have some governments where, because they could make a, law, we don't want, speeding, and the speed limit's going to be 55 or whatever. They could do that, but you don't have to go there. You don't have to live there. There's plenty of places. So right now we don't have any competition of governments.
Right.
You have some of that within states, but the federal government has become such an overbearing taskmaster on the states that they really can't do the things that might represent their citizens of that state a little better. But I remember years ago, Louisiana tried to lower the drinking age, and
This
the
this
state
was
said,
a Reagan era, right?
I think so. I think so. But the Fed said, nope, can't do it. We're going to take all your money for highways if you do that. So
Right.
the states have become reliant on federal government money, which they have no money. It's all stolen from us. So it's a system that perpetuates itself.
Right. I was talking to somebody. I guess this was a couple of weeks. Actually, it was a couple of months ago now. But I was saying that exact thing, and he looked at me and the federal government can't take the money for highways. I said, yes, they can. They do it all the time.
All the time.
And he goes, oh, because of the airplane emergency laws. And I said, sure. I'm going to agree with you on that because I have no clue.
Yeah.
But then I looked it up, and he was actually right, because that's why they need to be X amount wide, is so in case of an emergency, airplanes can land. But because of the emergency landing procedures for those things, the federal government has to pay for certain parts of it, and then they'll pull it.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? You see how laws perpetuate government.
Right.
That there's how many plane landings are there generally on highways?
Yeah, I can't name one in my life.
And so we spend billions and billions, or they spend billions and billions of our stolen money to make something that we really don't need. And it perpetuates the idea that we need them to do that for us, right? We need them to make sure that highways are big enough for planes to land on, because it might happen sometime.
Right. Because at some point in our lives, that could definitely 100% happen. No, probably not. Well,
Yeah.
planes are landing in the Hudson, but not on highways. Because could you imagine trying to shut down any part of New York, even for however long it takes for a plane to land?
No, I can't.
Right. Wouldn't be possible. That's pretty much everywhere in this nation at this point. Like, you couldn't do it around any major metropolitan area. Like,
Right.
maybe in the flyover states you'd be able to pull that off, but
Yeah.
nowhere
Where
else.
even where there's more area, like people have landed planes, but generally not on highways. Like you have to land wherever you happen to be. So I think too, it's this idea that, was it Thomas Jefferson who said, those who desire safety over freedom deserve neither, or something like that.
That was either him or Ben Franklin.
Maybe it's Ben Franklin. Whoever it was, they were exactly right, because freedom does not equal safety, right? And we've gotten very comfortable in our first world opulence, where we have decided, many people have decided, that their comfort is more important than their freedom. And that's unfortunate, because not only is it more important than their freedom, but then they get to make decisions for us, because in the system we have, the mob rules, and there's more of them than people who want to be free like us. So they get to determine that. But real freedom isn't safe. But nothing keeps you safe now. Police can't protect you. That's still your job, no matter how many police you have, no matter how much military there is. It always comes down to, how can you protect yourself? We don't, on the world stage, we cause a lot more problems. I say we, but the country, the United States, causes a lot more problems than it helps. That's for sure. And I think people have just gotten this idea that governments keep them safe, when governments are actually predatory upon them. It's a product of indoctrination, that's for sure.
It definitely is a product. Like, it's 100% a product of indoctrination. We posted a meme. I'm not sure which one of us posted the meme. If I had to guess, it was Mr. Murica, the Bearded Truth, that posted it. Just guessing, but it said something, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase because this is just coming off the top of my head here. But it said something about how could AOC is trying to turn us into a socialist nation, and how do we stop this? And it said, conservatives, stop spending money to send your kids to schools where they teach socialism. And we had people, and our page is, we're libertarian anarchists, depending on which one of us you're talking to at that moment. Okay. And we had people defending the school systems and saying that it's necessary. And it's like, their indoctrination camps is what they really are. Like,
yeah.
I don't care what you say. Like they are training the children to believe certain things. And a lot of it is that they're training the children to believe that their parents don't know what's best for them, but instead that the government does. So
yeah, they're based on the Prussian model, which was developed to teach factory workers. Like it's developed to teach obedience and belief in authority. Like that's where it starts, that you go here, you have to get up at odd hours and, spend your time away from your family and listen to this person who's in the stead of your parents in all these different ways. Just the actual way schools are, it perpetuates these kinds of ideas. They don't even have to say anything necessarily because the way the system is set up, it's set up to teach them those things. When a bell rings, this is what you do. And
right.
So not only is that bad, but there's so many things about the school system that are just not good developmentally for children. And everyone wants to, brush that under the rug because it's convenient, really. I mean, most parents, they want to send their kids to school so they don't have to be with them. And so... and so and to work, it's right. Not that they don't love their kids.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it's that they don't want to be with them. I just think that it's it's a great babysitter for however many hours a day.
Exactly. And I mean, if you hear summertime, all the complaining about, I can't wait till these kids go back to school. Right. It's a learned habit that we've not learned. Many people, sad to say, don't really parent their kids anymore. I'd sound like an old fogey that way, but I'm, I have 2 kids and I homeschool them, and I believe in parenting, in real parenting, even as an anarchist. And, my parenting style has certainly changed. I used to definitely be an authoritarian before I became a libertarian. So my son, who's 8 years older than my daughter, was parented when he was young in a much different way than my daughter, but I see myself as a legitimate authority in their life. So I believe in natural authorities and not authoritarianism, which is different, right. But that's where you get the difference. I think a lot of people have decided that their work is much more important than raising their kids because they trust the system. They trust the system, or at least educating their kids. They trust the system to do that. And really, even when I sent my son, he went to public school until 4th grade. Even when I sent him there, I still understood that educating my child was still my responsibility.
Right.
So I still needed to know what he was doing and all those things. Because I don't believe in no personal responsibility. And I think that, that's anarchism really is radical personal responsibility and radical freedom. Like they go hand in hand, and you can have one without the other. If you have radical freedom and no personal responsibility, that's where you get the Mad Max scenarios that people are so worried about. But libertarianism certainly doesn't teach that.
Yeah. So many people, I'll talk to them and I'll start talking about anarchist ideas, and they say, well, we just care about people more than you. And I'm like, no, no, we just believe in people more than you. And I'm like, no, you believe in government more than me. Right. I believe in people. You believe in the power. I believe in the people. And that's the big difference that I see in between definitions because they're like, oh no, I believe in people. Well, yeah, but you hate that the government does this. You hate that the government does this. You talk about how corrupt the government is, and then for many of you, the answer is more government,
Right.
in order to oversee these people. So it's like it makes no sense to me.
Right. It doesn't. And it really is. Anarchism is the radical belief that people can run their lives better than anyone else can, especially governments, with cookie cutter programs and, violence and coercion.
Right.
It's really interesting that people would view it that way. And I've had people say to me so many times when they find out I'm an anarchist, you better get ready for your neighbors to come, take your stuff and hurt you. And I'm like, they could do that now if they wanted to.
Right.
Like,
That
wouldn't you think
makes
the
no
police?
difference.
I'm sorry.
That makes no difference. The fact that there's a law saying you can't break into your neighbor's house, steal all their stuff, and murder them
Right.
doesn't change the fact that people can still do it.
Right.
Like,
And yeah, laws don't stop bad people from doing bad things. They don't stop it now.
Right.
With all the government in the world. They can't
Exactly.
stop it.
Yeah.
So, there are no utopias. I know anarchism, a lot of times it is idealistic because it's not something that's concrete in the world right now in a lot of places. Although, as you and I would know that most people live anarchy every day of their lives, most of the day. It's just people don't understand it. We've had in that school system and the media, we've had the state in control of the definitions of anarchy for a long time. And so you get I love the Mad Max movies, don't get me wrong, but that's what people think when they hear anarchy. They think, cannibals and, one group coming and taking over the less powerful group and things like that. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen. There would be conflict still, but I think there'd be a lot less of it and on a much, much smaller scale.
Yeah, I thought the last Mad Max movie, Fury Road, I believe was the name of that. The Oscar-nominated Mad Max movie, which just blows my mind. I thought that was just such a great movie.
I like it.
You had a lot of people on the right that were angry about it, and they were like, "Oh, it's a social justice warrior movie because female power or whatever." And I was like, "Did you watch that movie? That movie was great. I don't care that it was a bunch of women that were pregnant and Charlize Theron with a shaved head. Like, do it all.
Still looking good.
Yeah, still looking good. She definitely killed that look. Spike asked, without government, who would prevent the things that happen every day with government?
Me with my rocket launcher, with my, what do they call them? Tactical nukes.
The McNukes. The tactical McNukes.
Yeah.
That you can...
Someone did ask me that question the other day. Like, how would you prevent one group from overpowering another? And I wouldn't. Like, I think, for one, in an anarchist sort of society, you would probably have most people armed. So there'd be a lot less violence in that way. And if you look at the Old West, we have plenty of examples of most people being armed and there being a lot more peace than, that it's been portrayed as the Wild West and no law and lawlessness, when it really wasn't that at all. I mean, there were instances of that and certain places where that may have been more true, but overall, people were pretty darn safe in their towns, and they could protect themselves very easily. Now it's not the case, and if you're waiting on the police to protect you, well, good luck with that, because no matter how good the police are, whatever you want to say, they're historians. That's what police mostly are historians. They come and file reports.
True.
And the Supreme Court has already ruled that there's no mandate constitutionally for them to protect us. So not only do they not have to, they often don't. And even when they have the opportunity, they stand outside of schools and let children get murdered. So, and who knows, like, why? I don't know why, but those particular officers chose to do that. They don't have to protect you even if they're around. So I think we need to remember that it's still our responsibility to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite movies is Tombstone. Love,
That's a great movie.
right, great movie. And there's a scene in there, and I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't remember everybody's name. But two of the characters get into a gunfight, and the sheriff walks over and he's like, "Gonna need your gun, Bob." And he goes, "It was a fair fight. Both of us were armed." And he goes, "Still, town law." And he's like, "You know me, law-abiding citizen." He just shot somebody in the street, and he's like, "Law-abiding citizen," hands him his gun, and I was like, "Yeah, see, no, that's fine."
Right.
Totally, he's right. Fair fight. They both were armed. See, no
Right.
problem with it.
Who is it? Alexander Hamilton and
Aaron Burr.
Burr. I
Yeah,
can't remember his first name. They
Aaron.
did a duel.
So that was actually an illegal duel.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If people are going to do that, do I want them dueling in my street? Not necessarily, but I would rather have to put up with two people shooting each other like idiots than I would, people being disarmed. That's a much more
Absolutely.
dangerous thing.
Absolutely. Like, not too far from where I live, there is a relatively good chance that there would be duels in the street often. And if that were to be a thing and it got out of hand, I am certain that somebody in that same neighborhood would say, "We need a governmental program to clean up the bodies." And
Right.
then that would become a thing.
Yeah.
So I just got a comment that's very long from Fotini Henderson. California is trying to eliminate the death penalty, which is weird because I thought that they had done that a long time ago, which is why Charles Manson is still alive.
Right.
Thinking about pedophilia and violent child crimes and those that are sitting on death row, the question, good God, you made this long. That question wouldn't even come up if a parent took care of the issue themselves immediately. But I think basically, she's asking what would happen in the situation.
Vigilantism.
Right. I think that's where
Yeah.
she was going with that. It's like a paragraph long, so I didn't want to read till the end. Sorry, Fotini. Thank you for watching the show all the time. But yeah, I mean, what is the deal with vigilantism? What happens in those cases?
Well, I think, again, to reiterate, there would be common law, and we could have courts. Like, there would be courts. They would just not be monopolized by the state. So we wouldn't have the kind of conflicts of interest that we have right now, where, you have police who are state agents, who are the violent force of arm of the law, and then the law, the court system, which is also state agents. And then the people who write the laws are state agents. So the state often, that's why you see, cops who rape a 13-year-old getting probation. Like that
Right.
happens. So there's that issue with private courts. But also, I think a peaceful society would not want vigilantism for the most part. And the reason is because it can always go the wrong way. You can think something's one way. Trials are very, very important. That's why the jury system is so important. And to say nullification is the most important thing that you can have in a trial, because you can say, well, not only do I think this person's not wrong in what they've done, I also think the law is wrong. So you can just nullify that law. So I think, there would be probably instances of that, but would you really want that? I don't think so, because, we want to be sure that the people that pay any price, whatever that price might be, that a society determines, are actually guilty of the crime. And I don't know about you, but I'm not putting any pedophile or someone who actually killed someone who was actually a pedophile or whatever, protected their children. I'm not going to put them in prison.
Yeah, I'm not going to do anything to that person.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
I'm going to be like,
it's
I
not
get
that.
it. I absolutely get it. If
Yeah.
if Jordan Chandler's dad had hunted down Michael Jackson, I would not have cared even a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that in that situation, I don't know about Michael Jackson. I wonder sometimes with famous people, I often wonder because I mean, there may be details I don't know about certain specific cases,
Right.
but he had a lot of issues for sure, and I think he had this Peter Pan complex.
Definitely.
But he also had a lot of money, and there were a lot of incentives for people to say things happened because it was weird that maybe didn't happen. I'm not saying they didn't. They may have
Right. No,
clearly,
I
but
I totally understand that. I
yeah,
Michael Jackson's come to the forefront because of the Leaving Neverland documentary that came out, and I just watched it last week. So
yeah, I
anytime
haven't
somebody,
seen it.
yeah,
So.
anytime somebody says pedophile, he's the one I go to right now.
Yeah.
It's just he's the one that I go to. So that's just why that one came up.
Yeah.
And Jordan Chandler was the kid that accused him back in 1992 or three or whatever that was.
Can I just add one more thing to that?
No, absolutely.
There are some great videos by David Friedman on private law that I think he's probably the foremost person dealing with what could be in the future in a more decentralized system. And of course, Milton Friedman was his father, and he's a brilliant guy. So if anybody's interested in learning more about those issues, David Friedman's videos on YouTube would be a great place to go. I know Robert Murphy,
Yeah.
he's done some writing on what could be in the future. So I'm not for the state death penalty. I really don't want the state putting anyone to death because they can lie and get away with it, and they can. We've seen so many times where police and other people, DAs, have done things to get the collar, get someone put in prison so that they don't have to deal with it anymore. So I really don't think the state should be putting anyone to death, but I don't know what systems people would come up with.
Right. Yeah. To go back to a little bit earlier ago, we just kind of started talking about Mad Max, and one of the things that you told me, which while we were talking about everything, you're a huge sci-fi fan, and
I am,
and that that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because when you think sci-fi fan, you think somebody who looks like me, obviously, somebody who looks like me. But between the ages of 16 and 32, and if they're older than that, then hopefully they have a full-time job. Basically, that's basically about it for a sci-fi fan. So when I found out you were a sci-fi fan, I was like, interesting. And then we got into the basics like Star Wars or Star Trek, and so how exactly, like you said, that sci-fi has played a huge role in your life. And yeah. So can you explain that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to show you guys my shirt, my cool, sparkly Darth Vader shirt. Yeah. So I grew up very, very. So my dad loved Star Trek, and I had a very difficult relationship with my father, but it's one of the good memories that I have with him. And my father was very volatile, and I loved Spock. And so I think because he was just very calm and reasonable, and you always sort of knew what to expect. I remember running home from the bus stop when I was a little kid, like in kindergarten, to see reruns of the original series. And then watch Carol Burnett show after. So it was, for me, it was very influential in my younger years. And just the fantasy of it, I think the escape that it provided me, and coming from a home that was very, very abusive, and my young life was not very good. So for me, I think that was probably the reason at first that it appealed to me so much, was because of the escapism. I could get in a whole other, think about other things. And, for me, that was a really good thing. As I got older, I started exploring just the genre more. I love to read. And I came across Dune when I was in,
that's such
I don't know,
good
fifth
one.
grade or something.
That is such a good one.
Frank Herbert. I mean, that's an amazing series of books. But especially the first one. I it had to be, yeah, I was probably in 5th grade, and it was in my school library. I don't really know why it was there, but so I used to read a lot of mythology, and then I started reading more science fiction, and I grew up on things like Battlestar Galactica as well, and Akira. That was something. I had an uncle that was, oh, many years. He's probably 6 years older than I am. And I was very close to him, and he was involved in all that stuff. He was really big into Star Wars, and um, there was a movie, like free movies for kids during the summer, and
Oh, okay.
most of those were like fantasy and sci-fi. So
Right.
I like saw the Dark Crystal, things like that. Um, so that I think those were the big influences for me because of the I'm kind of an artistic person, so I always liked the fantasy of it. I've done makeup for stage at times, and so that was all that stuff sort of led into my love for those things. So
So it did not take long at all after we mentioned Star Trek, but some one of our
I know what the question's going to
oh
be.
yeah, you do. Star Trek is socialist, isn't it?
I that wasn't the question I thought it was going to be, but
Oh, okay.
I know.
I was gonna say that's
So
the first one I brought up to you, though. Well, first I said, "Are you a Trekkie? Star Wars or Star Trek?" And I like them both. And then we got
right.
into the conversation about the last movie, and we're not going to get into that today because
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to get into that argument today. And and then I got it. And then I said, "But Star Trek's socialist." And then you just had so many answers for that.
Yeah. Well, look, I think Gene Roddenberry was. He's often portrayed as a leftist, but he really wasn't. He was more of a moderate. And he was very interested, especially at the time that he was writing Star Trek, in diversity. And look, you had a country that was racked with racism. Like you think people think it's racist now, but like really, really racist at that time when black folks couldn't even go and sit in the same place as white folks. So I think that was one of his major concerns, and he was sort of obsessed with John F. Kennedy. Um, and as we know, JFK, as far as presidents go, he had some good things going. That's probably why he's dead.
Right? Yeah.
So uh, he wrote Kirk, that Kirk character, to be a type from John F. Kennedy. And also, he chose, which most people don't know this. So there is the idea of a more, especially as you go into like the next generation, a more socialist type of economic system and all that. They've evolved beyond money,
Right.
but there's still this core of individual responsibility that I think libertarians can really grasp onto. But Spock, that character, was he I guess the guy who invented Spock was a guy named DC Fontana, or maybe it's a female. I can't remember. It's DC Fontana, but who was a Randian. So you have this sort of objectivism in Star Trek as well, in this character of Spock. So um, I think all of that is just really shows that Gene Roddenberry was interested in real diversity. I'm not talking about quotas of you need so many, black people, so many white people, so many whatever. Not that kind of diversity, but in real diversity of, there are different kinds of people, and you would have them represented there. You have Chekhov and Sulu, who was part Japanese and part Filipino. So a lot of people forget that he wasn't just Japanese, that there was this Filipino aspect to him, and that's there's a lot of conflict in that. So, and you had Uhura for sure, whose name means liberty or freedom. So you've got all these Chekhov named after Chekhov, the writer. So there's a lot going on there. That's
Right.
a lot more than just the socialist aspects. And I think as you get into the next generation, for sure, you can see libertarian themes. Like they're all throughout the original series as well, but especially in the character of Picard, we see sometimes this very libertarian stance on issues. So, and then it sort of continues on into DS9 and Voyager.
all the others that
Yeah,
I don't know what
Enterprise.
they are.
Yeah, but I think Apex for me is definitely, my son and I argue often about which is better, DS9 or the Next Generation. Of course it's the Next Generation because he's a dumb kid. He doesn't know. He's 16. What do you know? No.
Yeah, it's so one I don't really have a memory of this, but one of my dad's favorite stories to tell is he took me to see one of the Star Wars movies when I was a kid, and he said that he said it it was going to be a great bonding experience for the two of us. We're going to have a great time. We're going to watch Star Wars, and apparently I was in it. I was just like locked on the screen, just staring, completely enthralled, and this is my dad's story to this, so I don't know what movie he's talking about even a little bit, but he said toward the end of the movie, Luke Skywalker is fighting Darth Vader, and I was like, no, that doesn't really happen, but okay. But he's like, he's fighting one of the bad guys, and he beats him with his lightsaber, and you were, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, and you jumped up in the theater and you yelled, "All right, Luke!" And everybody in the theater thought that was really funny because it was coming from a 4-year-old. If it came from somebody my age now, I'd slap that guy. But
Right.
4-year-old, I'd probably let that go. And he was like, it was just a really cool moment. And at that moment, I knew that you were probably going to be more of a movie guy than a sports guy. Yeah, that makes sense, Dad. But
I'm definitely more of a movie person than a sports person, that's for sure.
But yeah, I grew up with Star Wars. I've got numerous Star Wars. Like I saw all of the prequels opening day. I've seen all of the postquels opening day, and I have watched the original trilogy a number of times that can't be calculated by Common Core math.
I have the BBC radio show.
Do you have the BBC radio show?
I do. It's quite good, actually.
I've heard it's great. I've never heard it though.
Yeah, they got Anthony Daniels and a lot of the, like, Harrison Ford isn't on it, and I don't think Carrie Fisher is, but I think most of the others are the voice actors. There were quite a few that were the original, actors.
I have seen the Christmas special.
Yes, the terrible. We're not supposed to talk about that.
How can you not talk about the first time Boba Fett shows up? Like, you have to talk about it. It's part of the lore. That was the first time Boba Fett has ever made an appearance. So the Christmas special has to exist. Before he shows up in that, if you just watch Empire, he's this guy that agrees to go get Han Solo. Right. Like, that's it. Like, and then in Return of the Jedi, he dies. So you need to have. It was a travesty, but you need to see the Christmas special. Otherwise, that character doesn't make any. Like, it's just like, okay, yeah, he's just a guy. Unless you read the books and stuff, which I'm not going to do, but because I'm not that big.
I don't read them either.
Yeah, no.
I sort of have a thing for masks and robot voices, and I think that comes from watching Transformers growing up, and like what is it? Soundwave. The one that
Shockwave.
Talked like a Shockwave, yes.
Shockwave.
That talked like in the Cylons from BSG, the original BSG, like those voices. I really have like this thing for robot voices. I wish I had a robot voice. But and for masks, and I think that's probably I remember being very disappointed when they showed Boba Fett in real life because he's not my type. I like the mask.
Okay, so Chrissy McClellan has a very interesting question, and there's and 100% there's only one correct answer to this question.
Oh no!
Yeah, who shot first?
Oh God, Han shot first for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah, there's no question on that.
There's no question. The only people who say that Greedo shot first are people who are in denial.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, very important question because the world needs to remember Han shot first. I don't care what George Lucas did to bastardize his creative vision because he didn't think Han should do that. No, Han did that because Han was a badass and he did not care.
I think sometimes as libertarians, we tend to look at everything through a libertarian lens. And you know what? Not everything, not every good guy is going to do everything good. So,
We all make mistakes.
right.
He
And,
he also knew that if Greedo took him,
right.
Jabba was going to kill him
That's right.
or put him in
So,
carbonite, which ends up happening.
self-defense.
Right, self-defense. That's the way I see it. He was doing it in
Yeah.
self-defense.
I'm okay with it, honestly. Like, it doesn't make him bad for me. I think I've known a lot of people who, if you quote anything by Ben Franklin, my fellow anarchists sometimes be like, that man was a terrible human and had slaves and blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to say that having slaves is a good thing or that it was okay even then, but not everything he said was wrong. Like, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, and people are always a product of their times. That's not excusing it, but it's just saying, like, it's more understandable, and you know you just can't throw everything out because somebody did or said something once that wasn't the best.
That wasn't in your Overton window of what's okay and
Right.
what's not okay. Yeah, like Han shot first. I don't care what anybody says. George Lucas screwed up by changing the original trilogy and adding in all the CG. That
Yeah,
should
do you know the other? So my favorite movie is Blade Runner.
Oh, that movie's so good. God, that
Uh,
movie's good.
it's it's like my favorite. I have several that are up there very close, but so there's the other argument that is was Deckard a replicant?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I say
Yes,
too.
100%. That
Yeah.
he was a
Me too.
replicant.
I mean, now, with the newer one, it sort of answers all those things. But yeah, he was definitely a replicant. Ridley Scott, honestly, is probably my favorite director of all time because I love the Aliens movies, and just his aesthetic for me
Oh
is
yeah.
amazing coming out of the advertising world.
One of my favorites by him is The Martian,
Yeah,
because it really shows the ability of the human spirit to triumph over adversity. That's
yeah,
just the way I look at it. Also, the story behind it's amazing. The guy that wrote that book, and I have no idea what this guy's name is. I'm just going to preface that, but he was writing each chapter and giving it away for free. He'd write a chapter,
like a
edit it,
serial,
right, and then he
but
would
free.
for free. And then it was picking up steam, and it was picking up steam. More and more people were reading it. So he sold the last chapter when he made the last chapter, he sold the entire book for 99 cents, and it immediately hit #1 on Amazon and everything else.
Wow.
And so many people bought it that it got optioned into a script. And I just think that great way to do it. Fantastic story to do it with.
Yeah.
And the movie, I love the movie. Like, I
Yeah.
know that Matt Damon is, this weird lefty whatever, but I love that guy. He was Will Hunting. I will always have a special place for him in my heart.
Yeah. And apparently he's an anarchist. I think it's him. It was either him or Mark Wahlberg I heard give this speech, and I was like, holy shit. Excuse me, I don't know if I can say
Yeah,
that, but
you're fine. You're fine.
yeah, like, dude's an anarchist, like, clearly. So it was,
I cannot see that being Matt Damon.
It might have been Mark Wahlberg.
That
It was
makes
one of them.
right. I know Tim Allen recently said that.
Yeah, he said that a few years ago. I wonder. I think a lot of people, maybe and don't realize it, and then there's some people who think they are and aren't.
Right.
So
Well, you go to jail for cocaine distribution, you're suddenly not going to love the state all that much. So
you'd hope. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I hope he is. It's amazing.
yeah, no, definitely. Another, you said that you've got a couple of articles coming out. I'm completely switching gears here. You said that you have a couple of articles coming out, and
Well,
you know that I also write a lot. I've got 2 books out. I write for a political organization that I won't mention here, and because they're a mainstream political organization, and they don't want me to mention that I write for them on this show.
yeah, protect your money, honey. That's okay.
Right? Yeah. But in today's internet world, like, we look at things like, I would have preferred to make this a news website, but in today's day and age, everything's got to be video. Everything's got to be short clips. Everything's got to be quick. It's in your face and it's right now. It's immediate. Nobody, including myself. I'm not like blaming everybody else and saying it, just me. I don't want to read stuff. Like, if I can watch a video on it, I'll do that over reading an entire thing. The Martian, Game of Thrones. I'm going to watch those as opposed to reading the really, really, really long-winded, confusing books by George R.R. Martin. Tolkien, another great example. Like, so many people saw the movies, loved them, never have read the books. And I get it, because I don't understand that dude's language, because that's not English. But so in today's internet culture, how important is it to continue to write and push that out?
I think for me, for one, is just as a mental exercise, it's very good. Like, there's something reading and writing does for your brain that nothing else does.
Right.
And it's a way to really, it's concrete. And of course, you would hope that you have enough time whenever you're writing a piece that you would be able to sit down and really concentrate your thoughts into exactly what you want to say, and depending on your skill level and all that. But I think that people still take ideas more seriously that are written down. There's still a certain, romance, if you will, that comes with being an author. It's the same. Like, I used to be a photographer, and people think that's such a glamorous job, but it's not.
It's not.
It's really not. But there's like this sexiness with it, right? And I think being an author is the same thing, because there's a huge creative element to both of those things. So I think it's really important still in synthesizing your thoughts, for one, but also putting it out there as a serious, I don't want to say academic, but a serious contributor to real thought. I think there are a lot of brilliant people doing podcasts who don't write, but I think people tend to not take podcasters very seriously as part of the contribution to thought. So I think writing something down is really important in just getting the street cred, if you will.
I get that, yeah. And anybody who's watched Muddied Waters of Freedom with me and Spike, I understand why they wouldn't think that we are serious people, because we just aren't. But viewer Chrissy McClellan says, reading is more absorbed than rewatching, in my opinion. I think she had a stroke. I want a transcript too. If I watch, I want a transcript too. Got it.
Yeah.
I hope you're okay, and I hope you really didn't have a stroke, Chrissy. But yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, if I'm studying for something, I'm not going to watch a video. I'm going to read it, because that's how I intake knowledge. Some people may be able to do it the other way, and I'm wondering if this modern day schooling, where it seems like everything's on a screen or a tablet, or I guess they're all screens, but if that's going to change that, where people don't take in knowledge by actually reading anymore, but it's by watching and listening more.
Yeah, I think that reading, to me, seems a lot less passive than watching a video. I think there's when you're watching at a live lecture or something, there's certainly an amount of participation that you are involved in by being there. But reading, I think there's there's a real participation between the reader and the writer. Because you could watch a video or whatever, and you that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Even like, I think sometimes a lot of the nuances miss. Some of the best parts of a show, might not be there. The best parts of the story might be in the book. And,
right.
You don't know that if you haven't read it, or at least, maybe perused it. But sometimes they're pretty faithful to the ideas, especially like a lot of the classic literature. I think you can watch To Kill a Mockingbird and get a really good feel for the book, and because they stayed true to it. Whereas with Game of Thrones, I don't know if that's so much the case. I haven't read it, but my friend Alan, who has done both, is not.
Yeah.
He says they're way different. So
and so I'm gonna be completely transparent here. I've neither read Game of Thrones nor seen Game of Thrones.
You haven't watched
I
it?
haven't watched it, no. Because I'm one of those guys that's like, oh,
I like Red Fox.
everybody likes it,
Come on,
so
Elizabeth.
I have no idea what you're saying right now. But I remember I was watching an interview with George R. R. Martin once, and he said it was in the middle of season 5. I don't think the last book is written yet. I don't believe. I'm not
Right.
100.
No,
Right.
it's not finished.
Right. So he was still working on that, and he was going around doing this press tour for Game of Thrones, and he was on Conan or somebody, and Conan was asking him about the last book, and he's sitting there, and he looks like a character out of a Tolkien novel, and he's sitting there, and he's like, it's funny because the actors on the show come up to me at parties and they'll beg me not to write them out of the story because they don't want to be killed off in the books. And I look at them and say, you apparently haven't read the books. You died off in book 1. And yeah, so like he says they aren't anything like it. So I'm going to go with the guy that wrote the book because I feel as though he knows better than any of us.
Yeah. And I think another one of my favorite book series is I love Stephen King, but my very favorite thing Stephen King has ever written is the Dark Tower series.
Right.
And
that movie was so bad.
It was terrible. And I mean,
so
Idris Elba is a brilliant actor and a beautiful man, but even he could not save that terrible movie. I mean, there are some things that don't translate. And that's the thing that made the Dark Tower series so amazing was all the depth of the story and all of the strangeness. And that's really hard to communicate in the form of a movie. So, what took... I kept thinking during this, like, is this 3 or 4 books they're trying to condense into one? Like, it was really terrible. Like, it was just really terribly done. I had a feeling that was going to be the case. And I learned to accept a long time ago that if I'm going to see a movie, I really have to divorce it from the source material.
Yeah.
And look at it as its own work of art. And that came about with like Blade Runner being my favorite movie because it's of course based on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is quite different. And also Dune, another one of my favorite books. A lot of people hated that movie. I happen to love the movie, but it's a separate work.
I am a huge David Lynch fan. Huge David Lynch fan.
He's brilliant.
I have a Twin Peaks tattoo.
You are?
Yeah, I'm a huge David Lynch fan, especially of Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is the single greatest television show of my lifetime.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But Dune is probably my least favorite movie he has ever made. Bottom 2. It's in my bottom 2 movies that he's ever made. And it was nothing like the book. But the new one that's coming out with Jason Momoa, like the cast that they I can't remember the cast that they have for this new Dune movie looks just fantastic.
Yeah.
And I am super excited about this movie coming out.
Right. We'll see if they keep the themes in it that, and don't try to do the social justice warrioring thing. But I Children of Dune, which was a sci-fi miniseries that they did, was amazing. It was really great. And they made it a miniseries because there's more to tell. And I think now, TV has a lot more respect than maybe when we were little.
Yes.
That, movie stars didn't do television.
No.
You went one way, not the other. So if you were a movie star that was now doing television, you had really come down, which now it's not that way. So I think people are more, they'll give a book, a mini series as a chance to sort of let it breathe and really get the story out there. So I'm looking forward to that movie. I hope it's really good. And either way, it'll probably be entertaining. I mean, now The Dark Tower was just a bad movie all the way around. I would have liked it if it were just better, but it wasn't. Right. Even if it wasn't really The Dark Tower, it just wasn't any good. So I think if they make a decent enough movie, it'll be enjoyable. But I think you still look at all these movies that are being made that come from books. Books are where you really can let the ideas come from, anything. You can pull from anything, especially in science fiction. I think that I've heard it said that it's the most libertarian of the genres. And I think science fiction and fantasy really are, because you can, like, you think about, we were talking about Star Trek earlier, in the original series, um, he wrote so many of those episodes directly from what was going on in his day and time, and Roddenberry's day and time, like the episode with the people that are half black and half white, and the conflict that they have, and that was brilliant, and it was so directly to that time. So I think that you can do a lot of really great things with a lot of commentary that's entertaining, that's not quite on the nose, but that really shapes people's ideas. You look at like Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein, and there's all these great books that teach you a lot. Tolkien, I mean, like The Lord of the Rings is this great epic, and there's so many great values in it. And he didn't preach to you; he told you a story,
Right.
which is the basic human wonderful thing, that it's a wonderful device that we have as humans to instill values in people. It's entertain them, but teach them something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wrote Gollum, and Gollum was like the single greatest character ever written.
Yeah, amazing. And you think about it, it really goes back to like the Iliad, the Odyssey, a book that I love is Dante's Inferno. And the whole Divine Comedy is really good, but the Inferno is I thought if they make this into a movie, this will be epic.
Right.
Um, so those kinds of things, they're all really the roots of science fiction. They're great epic voyages and fantastical, and I loved Clash of the Titans, that terrible movie when I was a kid, but I still will watch it if I had time for TV.
That
And it's
movie
on
is
TV, I'd
so
watch it.
bad. That movie is just awful.
Harry Hamlin, that's yeah.
Yeah,
I
Harry
think that's the
Hamlin.
guy's name that plays the.
Yeah, that movie is so bad.
It
That
is,
movie is so
but
bad, it's great.
yeah,
It's one of those. Um, yeah, I used to. I spent most of my formidable years watching absolutely terrible movies
yeah,
because why not? But yeah, like whenever the source material is a book, and I've read the book, I'm typically let down. Then when I've
yes,
seen the movie and I'm like, oh, I need to read that book, and then I watch the book or watch the book, I read the book, I'm like, well, now I'm let down because you could have put all of this into this movie.
yeah,
One of the books that I have sitting right there is Train Spotting, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, which
a
probably
great
a
movie.
great movie, which probably explains why I am a recovering drug addict. But
You're not a recovering Scottish person, are you?
I'm not a recovering Scottish person. I wouldn't understand what any of them were saying. I got to watch Train Spotting with subtitles. But yeah, so like I'm reading this book, and it's written in Scottish dialect, which makes it a
Mhm.
very difficult read. But the book is so good, and it's from so many different points of view that you actually see what Sick Boy's thinking in this one scene, and you actually see what Renton's thinking in
Mhm.
this one thing. Like it's
Yeah,
fantastic. And one of my really good friends for Christmas, she got me the prequel and the sequel to Train Spotting. So
that's cool.
I'm very excited to get into those. But I'm not sure if
Yeah.
I'm ready because literally, first time I opened it and I thought that I got dyslexia because because it's not written in regular English. It's
Yeah.
parts of it are, but some parts aren't. The parts where Renton is talking, which is Ewan McGregor's character for anybody who doesn't know, the parts where he's talking, it's written and spelled the way a Scottish person would say these words. So
Right.
I looked at it and I was like, what is happening? And then I started saying everything out loud, and I realized that he was just phonetically spelling the words the way in a Scottish accent, which is, I mean, that taught me so much about Scottish language, or the Scottish dialect. And at the end, he's got an appendix that has definitions of words you may not know. And I found that when I was really close to the end of the book, and I had been Googling every word. And
You're like, oh, great. This would have been handy to
yeah,
know.
I would have loved to have known that this was a thing. But yeah, great book. Great book by Irvine Welsh.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really important, though, is that books can give you the internal dialogue that you can't get on a movie of characters. And that can be really important. What's that movie? 12 Angry Men. Remember that play?
Yeah, with the movie had Jack Lemmon, the original movie, 1963, I think, had Jack Lemmon, and I can't remember who else. I just remember Jack Lemmon.
I think the same guy from To Kill a Mockingbird. I can't think of the
Gregory
name.
Peck.
Gregory Peck. I think that he was in that too. I don't remember, but I think there's, if I'm remembering correctly, I think there's a lot of internal dialogue in that book.
Which there would have to be.
Yeah. And it's been a long, long time since I've seen that movie, but I believe that they tried to do that in the movie as well. And that used to be more of a device that was used in, I think, the 50s, 60s, maybe, where they would actually have like a voice that was telling you what the internal, but it's sort of corny, right? So even in these great movies, I think that's something that you lose when something is from the written work into a movie, that you sometimes lose that sort of internal dialogue and the motivations and of what the character is trying to say and why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
You may not always have time for that in a movie. So not everything can be Dances with Wolves, right?
Right. Yeah. That movie's great.
It is great.
I liked it so much better than when they remade it as Avatar. Yeah, so years ago, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a scriptwriter. I was going to move out to LA, and I was going to write scripts, and I was going to become famous, and I was going to, like win an Oscar one day for one of my scripts. Still could happen. Who knows? But so I took a screenwriting class, and my teacher said it is a standard idea that you do not use voiceovers. It is lazy writing. Because if the director and the actor cannot portray what that person is thinking and feeling just in their face, they shouldn't, that's when you start using the voiceovers, and it's because you need to explain further because you don't have a good enough director or writer or actor. And I was like, well, crap, there goes my script that I just wrote. Cause I had breaking the fourth walls. I had I had voiceovers. I had a bunch of stuff in there.
Right. I think rules are made to be broken, but it's true though. I think you have to know, that's the difference between when it's done well and when it's not, is that you have to know what the rules are and know how to follow them in order to break them.
Right.
And in photography, I learned that there are, there's certain composition rules in all of art. And you can break those. You can't break them all at the same time, but you can break them. You have to know when, though. You have to train yourself to know what's good and when something is good, even though it breaks a rule. But you have to train yourself in the rule first, generally.
Right, exactly. So I had to rewrite an entire script for him, and I had 3 days, and I was like, I got this. Nailed it, though. Nailed it. Got an A on it.
Cool.
Yeah, there was something I was going to say before that. I totally forgot what that was. It had to do with something we were talking about earlier. And now, which version of Blade Runner is your favorite?
You mean between the original first one and this prequel or the sequel?
No. So you've got the original theatrical version. You've got the studio director's cut, and then you've got the actual director's cut.
It's been a long time since I've seen the studio cut. That's not my favorite, I can tell you that. I think the director's cut is my favorite.
The Ridley Scott official.
Yeah, I think
that's the unicorn one, right?
Yes.
The unicorn origami one?
I forget. It's been a long time. I forget which one I have downstairs. I think I have the director's cut, and I think that it's the unicorn one,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure. But that makes it make sense, right? That ties like the Edward James Olmos is so
he's
fantastic in that
so good
movie.
in that movie.
He's not got a very big part, but man, that the little
Even
origami things, it's just so brilliant.
and I'm going to point this out. I do a lot of origami, like a lot. If anybody comes to my house, there's definitely going to be cranes and fishes everywhere.
That's cool.
'Cause, it's what like I'll be sitting there watching TV, just folding origami and tossing it. Like I'll do it at I'll do it when I'm at a kava bar or if I'm at a restaurant. I'll like fold something into an origami crane and I just leave it for the waitress because I don't need it because I've got literally hundreds.
Right.
But I was like, I started learning so I could learn how to make the origami unicorn from Blade Runner.
That's so cool.
And I have not been able to find anybody that can tell me how to make it without 3 separate pieces of paper.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Right. But I wasn't expecting you to. If you did, I would have been like, great, let's whip out some paper. Let's do this. Yeah, nobody's been able to say how to do it. And that made me so sad because I really wanted that to be one piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think origami is amazing. I used to do a lot with my son. He was really into it for a while. And I mean, there's some amazing. I just watch videos on YouTube sometimes of people making just these amazing things out of paper. And I I did it in high school. We had projects that we do a little bit with them with it, and I've always been really fascinated with Japanese culture ever since I was like 5 years old. I snuck up at night to watch this miniseries my mom was watching called Shogun, which is also a
Shogun.
book that was turned into a miniseries.
I believe it was a
And
movie too.
I'm sorry.
I think it was a movie too, by Kurosawa.
Uh, it might have been the guy who wrote the book was English, I think, or at least spoke English. I
Right.
don't think he was Japanese. So he was British or American. I think he was British. But so this was a mini series based on his book about the opening up of Japan, as they called it, which was really just the violent, you've got to
Right.
do this or we're going to keep blocking your port. But it was a brilliant movie. But I've been sort of obsessed with Japanese things ever since then, and I think it's really interesting because the Japanese have an idea that I really like, and that's that the final product is not the only important thing, that the final product is great, but each step of the way is supposed to be like they're trying to perfect the process as well as the end product. I just think that's a really interesting way to look at things. They also have this, I forget the word for it, kintsugi. They call it where it's mending. Like if you break a vase or something, they don't just throw it out. They'll mend it with like a precious metal. And
Yeah,
it's
they
more
use like gold
beautiful.
or
It's
they
considered,
use like gold or silver or something and
yeah,
I've seen
gold or
this.
copper, different things they'll use and maybe put gold leaf in there or whatever. But it's just the idea that you don't throw something away because it's broken, that experience makes it more valuable. And I think that's sort of a beautiful thing, and something maybe in the West we don't value things quite as much. That people are disposable, and so are things, and to a lot of people in the West, unfortunately. But
The the original upcyclers.
yeah, yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
The original upcyclers. And most of the stuff that I've seen that's been upcycled, I'm like, that looks awful. Why did you do that? You broke a glass. Throw it
Yeah.
away. But we're actually a little bit over time, but this has been
Okay.
this has been a fantastic conversation. I would love to have you on anytime that you want to come on.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to come back.
Excellent. Pitch anything that you want to pitch, if you have anything you want to pitch.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm speaking of writing. I've worked on a couple articles. They're not even close to being ready yet. But I'm doing a writing thing every day. It's a subscription service called Freedom 365. You can go to sounds like liberty.org soundslike.com/365, I think. If you go to Sounds Like Liberty, you can find it, which is my friend Nick Picone's podcast. And so we're doing this along with Luke Tatum from the Peace and Prosperity podcast.
Yes.
I hope I didn't get that wrong.
No, it's
but
peace and prosperity.
So we've been writing.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think it's Peace and Prosperity.
Yeah. So we do these music summaries from a libertarian perspective. So songs that sort of have a liberty theme, or there have been a couple that I thought were completely the opposite. And so we write about that and our different perspectives on it to sort of give people an artistic, entertaining way to talk to their friends about libertarian principles. So maybe things that they haven't considered before. And there's a community that goes with that. So that's something I'm doing that I really am enjoying, because it's making me write every day. And that's one of the things my friend Anthony Samaroff, who is a great writer, had said, is that you need to write every day. Like, that's what you need to be doing. So this sort of forces me to do that. And I can already tell my writing. I got my thesaurus out every day. Like, I'm looking on the thesaurus to choose different words. And yeah, so I think that's one thing that I'm kind of proud to be doing right now, because it's a real benefit to me to get those out there, to have to think about things in a different way. And I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, writing is my therapy. Like, whenever I'm in my head a lot, I'll sit at a keyboard. What I write sometimes maybe crap, but it's getting it out. And doing it every day.
Like that stream of consciousness.
Exactly.
So I used to write bad poetry when I was in high school. Really bad poetry.
I may have a really bad poetry book coming out soon. Because my editor found a poetry site of mine, and she was reading it, and she goes, "You should publish these and sell them." And I was like, "I should not, because those are terrible." And she says, "No, this will sell really well." And I was like, "All right, whatever. I don't care. If you want to put it here, I'll put them together. You edit it." She goes, "Okay." So I may have one of those coming out, but I have another. There's another book that's in the queue before that one. So that cool. One I basically ripped off from Trainspotting, though, because I really like that movie, and this one is a lot about what I did when I was a drug addict. So
yeah, I mean, all things, all stories basically are recycled,
right?
Just from our own point of view in our time. So.
There's only 5 different stories in the world. So,
yeah.
Well, yeah. Again, thank you so much. If you want to hang out for a little bit, so we can talk a little bit more afterwards. Sure. Remember Post Secret? Yes, I remember Post Secret. Old website where people would post secrets and anonymously. They were awful. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the face you should be making on that one. That was terrifying. You would go on it being like, please, not today. But yeah, to everybody else, tune in tomorrow night at either 7 or 8 Eastern for Mr. America, the Bearded Truth, who is closing out our week. Then we are taking 2 days off before Mr. America, the Bearded Truth comes back to open up next week. Next Tuesday is a very special episode of the Muddied Waters of Freedom, as I have now completed. Well, on Tuesday, I will have then completed another cycle around the sun, which means that we're supposed to celebrate or something, and I don't really care. But after that, on Wednesday, we've got My Fellow Americans with Spike, and then right back here next Thursday for the next episode of the Writer's Block. Great guest next week. Not going to spoil it for you right now, but I'm really looking forward to that show. Have yourselves a great week, and make sure you tune in to Mr. America tomorrow night, and we will see you next week. I am swinging from a 7-story window, throwing
throwing parties in a 10 by 7 cell. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help. Yeah, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'll try to use your body as a life raft, 'cause if there's room enough for one, there must be room enough for two. I'll sail the good ship you into the sunset, sipping on savory water till my liver turns blue. Sha-na-na, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Is broadcast in the evening news. I will be relieved. La, la, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'm waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. La, 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 singing, hey, hey, alright, yeah, I wrote that one myself. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help.